May the 2nd, 2006. Up until August the 30th of 2019, May 2nd, 2006 was the last date of a brand new Tool album here in the United States of America. 13 years ago, 4,808 days ago, practically, once we get to tomorrow. 10,000 Days, which was highlighted by the song Vicarious, which whenever that came onto the radio, solidified that the 10,000 Days album that had leaked a week prior to its release was the real deal and was not one of the band's all too familiar pranks and jokes. Vicarious, which again, the highlight song, perhaps the point or the song that most folks recall, although this album might actually have a competitor. Similar to Prison Sex and Sober from Undertow, there's two tracks off of 10,000 Days that immediately may come to mind for folks whenever it comes to this disc. The other being, of course, The Pot, and there's various reasons as to why. It's like a stoner rejoice anthem. It's hysterical, especially whenever you consider the fact that this is just an extended style jam that doesn't actually have too much of a true structure to it, or at least didn't whenever it was being recorded. This whole entire album does take on a very interesting veneer also, considering with Lateralis the band was exploring more artistic territory. It was becoming a little bit more experimental, psychedelic. There was still that metal aspect that was in there, but there was still alternative rock. They were becoming a hybrid of themselves, and it was something that was extremely successful. With 10,000 Days, they actually dialed things back a little bit on some of those aspects, but still maintained that explorative touch. In fact, that became the thing that some folks may have actually complained about mostly on this disc, is that they kind of were exploring too much, that they were going a little bit too far out of bounds, that in some cases this was an album that was too soft, whereas in other cases it was a little bit harder than usual. It was very disjointed, up and down. It was almost like a sonic experiment. But whenever you listen to this, whenever you go from Vicarious just to Zombie, you do notice that little bit of a jump, that little bit of a difference. The almost tribal sounds of Zombie feel like it is a direct opposite to what Vicarious was able to deliver. And then whenever you go into Wings for Marie, parts 1 and part 2, you have this elongated, very long form, 17 minutes between the two tracks, by the way, ode that feels very personal, very tight, but also very soft and silent in a lot of places, especially in part 1. Whereas part 2 is this 11-minute long just festival of ambition, and it's really a track that's hard to describe because it has the softness. It does have elevation where it does move up. It's a very moving piece, but at the same time also feels like there's a lot of angst and a lot of anger or perhaps regret that is laced within it. There's so much that's packed within these two songs. It may have been a little highbrow, or at least seemed that way, but it's really pretty darn solid whenever you listen to it as a whole. But then everybody immediately wants to go to The Pot. This strange little bird, this strange device that actually got a radio play back in 2007. Back in 2007, we're not talking 2019 where the feelings toward marijuana have clearly changed quite a bit as opposed to 2007. We're talking back then where it was still seen as very demonized. We're 1 year prior to the Great Recession here. This is still old world thinking, and I can't believe I'm saying that about a concept such as 13 years ago. But really, whenever you consider 2019 versus 2006 and 2007, there is a lot of aspects that feel like very different worlds. Moving in to the second half of this song, or the second half of this album, The Pot was never the track that I immediately grasped onto. Instead, it was the long-form Rosetta Stone, which I still find to be one of the most perfect Tool songs to this very day. I mean, I love tracks such as Push It. I'm in love with Reflection. I just talked about Wings for Marie. I love going all the way back and listening to 4 Degrees off of Undertow, as well as other tracks from that disc, from all of them. But Rosetta Stone for me was just perfect. It was beautiful. It was itself its own real experience. It didn't have much structure based around it. It was an extended jam, perhaps more so than The Pot, actually. Now that I'm thinking about it, perhaps the marijuana has infested my brain and caused me to sort of have some conflicting information, but Rosetta Stone was just a beautiful track, not to mention it was an impressive track. It had heaviness, it had artistic value. It kind of bended and weaved in so many various directions that its 11-minute runtime didn't feel like 11 minutes. And it was a key part of the second half of this disc that also includes another one of a somewhat of a trademark song, at least for me, from Tool off of 10,000 Days, and kind of why I'm a sound defender of this disc to those who perhaps didn't like it. I can name so many tracks on here that I've listened to over and over again, and Right Into is one of those. It is the penultimate song on the album, and some of these lyrics are just so very simple, but yet have such power and poignancy, and that's the thing that Tool has been. It's one part of the trinity of things that Tool has been known for throughout their years. There's this lyricism that has this very almost philosophical, historical take on how humanity has grown and how we have been just fighting for pieces of the ground throughout the entirety of our existence. I know that I'm simplifying this, but come on, I don't have time to teach a college-level course on Right Into by Tool. Listen to the song, you monkeys. This is just a great example of Maynard's lyricism combining with a relatively simple musical construction, especially during its opening portions, and then you get the visual aspect within your own mind. That's one thing that 10,000 Days I think is terrific for, based off its atmosphere. Its packaging showed that visual creativity that they've really started to be known for, especially with the release of Lateralis. Those spectacles, those eyeglasses, sort of those visions into the world that were packaged with the album were a great example to almost what you needed in order to enjoy the album. You needed to put on those sort of rose-tinted or multicolored glasses and really look at things from a little bit of a different view. But in this case, instead of the glasses being on your eyes, they were on your ears, and you were hearing some things that were vastly different than perhaps which you were initially very familiar with. Tool still very much was a band that was known by a wide mass. This is a group that really should be the gateway drug for a lot of progressive music fans, considering they may not have that same tone. Maynard's voice is not going to be the same voice that you hear listening to a band such as Marillion with Fish, either that or listening to Dream Theater and hearing James LeBray. You're going to get very differing tones. Tool does still, at this point in their career, feel incredibly unique. But whenever you listen to this music and hear this philosophy, it shows and illuminates why Tool has always been one of a kind. And that was always what their legend sort of has been able to behold, and why there are so many folks that don't have very many negative things to say about the group. And I myself, quite honestly, am one of them. You know, I'm not a prog snob whenever it comes to Tool, but I do understand their merit and understand why this is a group that consistently gets praise. It's because they have a unique overall aura that surrounds them that was not manifested by the fans. It was instead manifested by what we got, by what the product is and what the product was and what the product could potentially become. It was a certain semblance of where were they going to go next, what were they going to do next, and how was it going to feel. Initially, this album to some might be a troubling one, but to me, it wasn't. Instead, I look at this and don't see it as the worst Tool album, as some have said. I disagree completely. We're going to do a discography review after Fear Inoculum releases. We're going to throw that album on there. We're going to see where everything pans out. But I can give you a spoiler alert right here at the very end of this video for 10,000 Days. Well, I'll give you two spoilers. One, I already spoiled in the opening. It didn't take 10,000 days for Fear Inoculum, and it sure felt like it. But the second spoiler is that there's no real wrong answer whenever it comes to a Tool release. Chances are, if you listen to one and you don't like it, you might not like what they offer. But if you find one thing that you latch onto, chances are you're in for a unique musical journey that could potentially border on obsession. That's just the power. I don't like to admit that, but it is the power, and it is real. Like I said in the opening, 4,808 days. That's where we are now. Well, where we'll be tomorrow. when Fear Inoculum drops. I hope all of you join me as we explore the brand new tool experience and see where they've gone next, to see what took nearly half of 10,000 days to accomplish. Cover Killer Nation, and I'll talk to you next time. See you.